Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. And this is Mysticism of Omar by Manly P. Hall. An article taken from The All-Seeing Eye, Volume 5, Number 2, November 1930. Mysticism of Omar by Manly P. Hall. Omar, the mystic, climbed through the 7 gates and on the ancient throne of Saturn's sate. Many a knot he unravelled by the way, but not the master knot of human fate. Thus, from his own admission, we learn that the tent maker followed Mohammed through the 7 spheres, exploring with extended intellectual faculties all the mysteries of existence, only to discover finally that the essential truths of life remained as unsolvable as before. The pessimistic quatrains of Omar are the result of this disillusionment concerning the reality, or even the possibility of knowledge. He had not yet learned that reason is a process in the understanding rather than in the mind. So from this fruitless effort to grasp infinities with finite comprehension, Omar turned to choose the mystic way of ecstasy. He tells us of his secret aspiration, how from his base metal will be filed a key that shall unlock the door the dervish flouts without. Omar himself becomes an embodiment of the wild abandonment of Jalaluddin, that saint who whirled himself into infinity by spinning his body to the rhythm of the stars. Grieving over the unreality of things as they seem to be, and the hopelessness of being itself, Omar turns from the contemplation of phenomenal illusions to drown his sorrows in the wine of forgetfulness. This is a definitely Oriental idea. Departing from the so-called reasonable attitudes of mankind, the ascetic finds himself picked up and whirled through space, his very being scattered through the substances of the superdimensional universe. In his ecstasy, he suddenly realizes that yesterday is dead and tomorrow will never come, that there is only an infinite and eternal ever-flowing now, that the past is a vast area of faint regrets, and the future abode of dreams that will never come true. The mystic no longer dwells in time, time dwells in him. He absorbs dimensions and intervals, and by virtue of his own enthusiasm extends beyond all boundaries and limitations. Sensing the impossibility of ever rationally comprehending the infinite, the dervish attempts to feel that which he can never know by intellection. Unable to understand life, he chooses to open himself to it so completely that he becomes intoxicated by the divinity that flows through him. Stirred by a strange fire that glows within and urges him to the wild abandon of his sect, the dervish flings wide his arms, and as his whirling starts, he so completely relaxes that even as he spins, he seemingly sinks backward into the soft embrace of space. His mind thinks motion, his soul feels motion, and with some inner faculty he perceives the infinite motion of cosmos. The earth beneath him and things about him vanish as in a whirlwind. The phenomenal sphere with its infinite diversity of illusions fades into nothingness, and he whirls, possessed by the strange exuberance of life. Something within him stirs. The bud of the mystic rose turns over and swells from within outward, as with waves of ecstasy he feels its petals opening one by one and releasing the reservoir of life within. First little ringlets of life appear, then streams of energy pour from him, and finally, as the flower reaches the fullness of its bloom, it seems as though his soul is whirled into nothingness. This is the intoxication of the Persian and Mohammedan mystics. They are drunk, as it were, with the spiritual effulgency. The individuality is shattered by the force of this immense and all-possessing passion. Memory ceases, hope, ambition, everything vanishes until the only emotion left is a perfect bliss that knows neither itself nor any other thing. For a moment the dervish is not, life is not, God is not. Nothing is but the sweeping vibration that whirls the whole being into a terrific emotional crisis. If you look into the face of the dervish while this awesome mood possesses him, you will see his visage lighted by an almost terrifying splendor. He is drunk with God. This is the mystical experience which psychologists have such difficulty in explaining, which science cannot comprehend, and which is wholly indescribable. It is the ecstasy of the saints, that tremendous force which, whether actual or imaginary, completely destroys the normal rhythm of life and throws the ascetic into an almost unbelievable state of sufficiency. When he returns to normal consciousness, the dervish brings with him a certain recollection of the condition through which he has passed. From that time on, he lives but with a single ideal, the final absorption into this bliss of which he has tasted. Union with his beloved becomes his one purpose, and this beloved is naught else but the sphere of his ecstasy. Not until this inner realization of the power of beauty, the infinite perfectness and wisdom of existence, and the strength of infinite purpose does the individual achieve to true wisdom. A man may possess the earth, reach the heights of authority, master the most intricate art or science, and be elevated to the state of godhood by an admiring populace. Yet until beauty possesses his soul, he is an empty and lifeless shell. Not knowledge, but appreciation for and ability to sense the deeper purposes of life constitute the open sesame to the divine sphere. Appreciation is the power to sense the greater beauty, to see with the eyes of the soul. Appreciation is something that cannot be created by mere affirmation. It is an instinctive thing, the measure of consciousness. It is the instantaneous realization of values neither intellectual nor again purely emotional. Appreciation is the highest form of comprehension. The Occident is a stranger to this abandonment of the soul, which is an integral element in Oriental philosophy. In the West, however, there occasionally appears a personality so fundamentally Eastern in its temperament that it exemplifies the true asceticism. Such a person was St. Francis of Assisi, who, in the height of his religious ecstasy, is said to have licked the leper's sores, yet because of his peculiar state was never infected by any of the diseases constantly contacted by him. Another extreme example was Dante, who, we are told, was so ecstatically keyed up that he could not look at a flower without being thrown into a faint by the sense of beauty that swept over him. A mind so sensitive to the beauty and fragrance of the rose was considered unbalanced because its poise and equilibrium were overturned by this soul intoxication. There is no question that in later years Dante used the character of Beatrice to signify this ecstatic state which grew ever more to be his true sphere of manifestation. The great East Indian saint Ramakrishna, near the close of his life, could only speak a few words concerning the glory of the Divine Mother before the mood of infinite tenderness and compassion thus invoked would sweep him into an ecstatic state. One of the last pictures of Ramakrishna shows him being supported by a disciple on either side. The man looks as though he were intoxicated, but he was drunk with God. He had given himself over to the wine of Omar. The last few years of Ramakrishna's life were hardly lived in this physical world at all, he being united for the most part with the beauty and magnificence of the divinity whose abode was the sphere of ecstasy. There is a strange thing about this soul intoxication. It is very habit-forming. An individual who thinks that the nicotine, morphine, or alcohol habit can possess the life should realize how completely enthralling the ecstatic state becomes. Once the disciple has tasted of this wine of life, nothing else holds any interest for him. The visions of the Eastern mystic become more frequent and of longer duration until finally, with his face lighted as by some celestial splendor, he whispers, "I go to my beloved," to sink into a trance-like state from which he returns no more. One would be led to infer from the Oriental fables, especially those of Arabia and Persia, and of which the Rubaiyat of Omar is an example, that Eastern saints and mystics were extremely intemperate. Their intemperances, however, were of the soul rather than the body. Arabian literature describes the orgies of the wise in a manner resembling the ancient Greek bacchanalia. The sages are depicted as seated before a board groaning beneath the weight of culinary delicacies. As the banquet progresses, the wine flows like water. The partakers lose all sense of propriety, and the whole affair reaches its climax in a revolting scene of debauchery and licentiousness. The disgusted reader turns from the narrative as from an unexpurgated edition of the Arabian Nights, unable to find any excuse for chronicling the episode. But what are the facts? Let us presume that we are attending, vicariously of course, one of these banquets. You will see the mystics, saints, and sages sitting either along the wall or in a circle, each reclining against a forked stick which holds his arm and supports his body. Neither food nor drink is in sight, and if by chance there should be a meal, it is of the coarsest ingredients and meager in the extreme, indulgences of the imagination, not of the body. First is the banquet itself, when the feast of the wise is spread, the feast of discourse, rich and dainty foods being the discussion of those great truths by which heart and mind are fed with that knowledge which is indeed the bread of the wise. Then the wine begins to flow, but the wine is chanting and praying or meditation, by which the ecstatic state is gradually invoked. The wild orgy that follows is the ecstasy of the soul, which, lifting itself up, is mingled with its divine part. If you will read Omar thus interpreting the word wine, the rest of the story becomes evident. The old tent maker should not be regarded as a wine bibber in the ordinary sense of the word, for his wine is the communion cup of all ages, that sacred vessel containing the wine of ecstasy, the very blood of God itself. Thus, the true meaning of the word orgy is revealed in its original form, being a communion of saints. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.